Deep in the heart of ancient Greece, shrouded in secrecy and guarded by solemn oaths, the Eleusinian Mysteries unfolded, a ritual so profound that those who experienced it were forever changed. For over 1,000 years, these ceremonies drew kings, philosophers, and ordinary citizens alike, all seeking answers to life's greatest questions. What made these rites so compelling that they endured for centuries, and what truths were so powerful that revealing them could mean death? Today, we're stepping into the shadows of antiquity to uncover the forgotten ceremonies and mythic beliefs that shaped civilizations. From the sacred rituals of Eleusis to the enigmatic practices of lost cultures, we'll explore how these ancient traditions continue to echo in our modern world. What secrets did these ceremonies hold, and why were they so vital to the societies that practiced them? Join us as we unravel the mysteries of the past, tracing the threads that connect us to the hidden wisdom of our ancestors. This is a journey into the heart of human curiosity, where history, mythology, and the unknown converge. Let's begin. Long before the rise of great civilizations, in the shadowed caves and open plains of prehistoric times, humanity's earliest ceremonies began to take shape. These were not the grand spectacles of later ages, but intimate acts of survival and connection, rituals born from the rhythms of nature and the mysteries of the unseen world. Shamans, the spiritual intermediaries of their tribes, would lead these rites, chanting, dancing, and invoking the spirits of the earth, sky, and water. Their goal was simple yet profound: to ensure the tribe's survival, to heal the sick, and to commune with forces beyond human understanding. These early practices were deeply rooted in the cycles of nature, the rising and setting of the sun, the phases of the moon, the turning of the seasons. They were a way for ancient people to make sense of a world that often felt unpredictable and overwhelming. As time passed, these simple rituals grew more elaborate, mirroring humanity's own evolution. What began as small, localized practices became complex systems of belief, intertwining with the fabric of emerging societies. Take, for example, the awe-inspiring Stonehenge, a monument that stands as a testament to humanity's desire to align itself with the cosmos. The precise alignment of its stones with the solstices suggests a deep understanding of celestial events, a way for ancient people to mark time and honor the cycles that govern their lives. This wasn't just about survival, it was about finding meaning in the patterns of the universe, about creating a bridge between the earthly and the divine. These ceremonies also served a vital social function. They brought communities together, fostering a sense of unity and shared purpose. In a world without written laws or formal institutions, rituals provided a framework for social order, a way to reinforce values and resolve conflicts. They were a means of passing down knowledge, of teaching the next generation how to live in harmony with the world around them. And perhaps most importantly, they offered a way to confront the unknown, to face the mysteries of life and death with courage and hope. But beneath the surface of these rituals lay something even deeper, a symbolic language that spoke to the human soul. The dances, the chants, the offerings, they weren't just acts of devotion. They were expressions of something universal, a longing to connect with the infinite. As we explore these ancient ceremonies, we begin to see that they were more than just traditions. They were a way of understanding what it means to be human. And as we move forward in our journey, we'll uncover how these symbolic meanings evolved, shaping the mythic beliefs that continue to influence us today. Mythology was the lifeblood of ancient civilizations, the thread that wove together the fabric of their beliefs, rituals, and understanding of the world. These stories were far more than mere tales told around a fire. They were the foundation upon which entire cultures built their sense of identity, purpose, and connection to the cosmos. Myths served as explanations for the inexplicable, offering answers to questions that have haunted humanity since the dawn of consciousness. Where did we come from? What happens after we die? Why do the stars move across the sky? In the ancient world, myths were not just stories, they were truths shared through generations, shaping the way people lived, worshipped, and understood their place in the universe. One of the most striking examples of this interplay between myth and ritual comes from ancient Egypt, where the story of Osiris, the god of the afterlife, resurrection, and fertility, became central to their funerary practices. According to the myth, Osiris was murdered by his brother Set, dismembered and scattered across the land. His wife, Isis, painstakingly gathered his pieces, reassembled him, and through her magic, brought him back to life. This tale wasn't just a dramatic story, it was a blueprint for the Egyptian understanding of death and rebirth. When a pharaoh, or even an ordinary Egyptian, died, they believed they could follow Osiris's path, overcoming death to achieve eternal life. The elaborate process of mummification, the placing of amulets, and the recitation of spells from the Book of the Dead were all rituals deeply rooted in this myth. They weren't just honoring Osiris, they were enacting his story, ensuring their own journey to the afterlife. But myths weren't just about explaining the afterlife or natural phenomena, they were also tools for teaching moral lessons and preserving cultural values. The story of Osiris, for instance, wasn't just about resurrection, it was also a tale of loyalty, perseverance, and the triumph of good over evil. Isis's unwavering devotion to her husband and her determination to restore him to life became a model for love and resilience. These narratives were passed down not only to entertain but to instruct, guiding individuals on how to live in harmony with one another and the divine. The relationship between myth and ritual was symbiotic. Myths gave meaning to rituals, while rituals brought myths to life, making them tangible and immediate. Take, for example, the Greek Eleusinian Mysteries, which we touched on earlier. The rituals performed there were steeped in the myth of Demeter and Persephone, a story that explained the changing of the seasons and the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Participants didn't just hear the story, they experienced it, immersing themselves in the emotional and spiritual journey of the goddesses. This wasn't passive storytelling, it was active participation, a way of internalizing the lessons of the myth and connecting with the divine on a deeply personal level. So how did these myths shape humanity's understanding of the divine and the unknown? They offered a framework for interpreting the mysteries of existence, transforming fear and uncertainty into understanding and hope. Myths provided a language for the sacred, a way to articulate the ineffable. They allowed people to see themselves as part of a larger story, one that connected them to the gods, to nature, and to one another. And as these myths were enacted through rituals, they became more than just stories, they became lived experiences, shaping not only individual lives but entire civilizations. As we delve deeper into the world of ancient ceremonies, it's impossible to ignore the sacred spaces where these myths and rituals came to life. These weren't just physical locations, they were thresholds between the earthly and the divine, places where the stories of the gods and the actions of humanity intersected. From the towering temples of Egypt to the secluded groves of Greece, these spaces were designed to elevate the ordinary into the extraordinary, transforming the act of worship into a profound encounter with the sacred. And it's here, in these hallowed grounds, that we'll uncover the next layer of our journey into the lost legends and forgotten ceremonies of antiquity. Sacred spaces were more than mere backdrops for ancient rituals, they were the very heart of spiritual life, meticulously designed to bridge the gap between the human and the divine. Imagine standing before the towering columns of the Parthenon in ancient Athens, its marble gleaming under the Mediterranean sun. This wasn't just a temple, it was a statement of devotion, a physical embodiment of the god's presence on earth. Every detail, from its proportions to its placement, was intended to inspire awe and reverence. The Parthenon's alignment with the rising sun during certain festivals wasn't accidental. It was a deliberate act to harmonize human worship with the rhythms of the cosmos. These architectural marvels were more than buildings, they were gateways, inviting the faithful to step out of the mundane and into the sacred. But not all sacred spaces were man-made. Deep within the forests of ancient Europe, the Druids gathered in secluded groves, where towering oaks and whispering streams created a natural sanctuary. These groves were not chosen at random. They were believed to be places where the veil between worlds was thinnest, where the divine could be felt in the rustle of leaves and the murmur of water. The Druids saw nature itself as a temple, a living, breathing expression of the sacred. Rituals performed here were deeply tied to the cycles of the earth's solstices, equinoxes, and the turning of the seasons. These groves were not just places of worship, they were reminders of humanity's connection to the natural world, a connection that was both spiritual and practical. Water, too, played a central role in many sacred spaces. From the sacred springs of Delphi to the ritual baths of ancient Rome, water was seen as a purifying force, capable of washing away impurities and preparing the soul for communion with the divine. At Delphi, the oracle would bathe in the sacred Castalian spring before delivering her prophecies, a ritual that symbolized her transition from the mortal realm to the divine. The spring wasn't just a source of water, it was a conduit for the god's wisdom, a place where the boundaries between the earthly and the eternal blurred. Similarly, in Roman temples, fountains and pools were common features, their flowing waters representing the life-giving power of the gods. Celestial alignments were another key feature of sacred spaces, reflecting the ancient belief that the heavens held the keys to divine knowledge. The Great Pyramid of Giza, for instance, is aligned with astonishing precision to the cardinal points of the compass, a feat that speaks to the Egyptians' deep understanding of astronomy. Temples across the ancient world often faced the rising or setting sun during significant celestial events, creating moments of alignment that were both symbolic and practical. These alignments weren't just about marking time, they were about creating a direct line of communication with the gods, a way to ensure that human actions were in harmony with divine will. At the center of these sacred spaces were the priests and priestesses, the intermediaries between the human and the divine. In Delphi, the Pythia, the high priestess of Apollo, was believed to channel the god's voice, delivering prophecies that shaped the course of empires. Her role was not just ceremonial, it was deeply spiritual, requiring years of training and preparation. Similarly, in Egypt, the priests of Ammon were not only caretakers of the temple, but also guardians of sacred knowledge, preserving rituals and texts that had been passed down for generations. These figures were more than religious leaders. They were the living embodiment of their culture's connection to the divine, guiding the faithful through the mysteries of their traditions. As we explore these sacred spaces, we begin to see a pattern, a universal human desire to create places that elevate the spirit and connect us to something greater than ourselves. Whether through towering temples, secluded groves, or celestial alignments, these spaces were designed to evoke wonder and facilitate transformation. They remind us that the sacred is not confined to the heavens, it is woven into the very fabric of the earth, waiting to be discovered in the places where we seek it. And as we turn our attention to the rituals performed within these spaces, we'll uncover how these acts of devotion brought the divine into the lives of those who practiced them, shaping the course of history in profound and lasting ways. The spiritual leaders of antiquity, priests, priestesses, and shamans, were more than just figures of authority. They were the living bridges between humanity and the divine. These individuals, chosen for their unique gifts and rigorous training, held the keys to ancient wisdom, rituals, and the mysteries of the unseen world. Their roles were as varied as the cultures they served, yet they shared a common purpose: to mediate between the earthly and the eternal, to interpret the will of the gods, and to ensure the survival of their people's sacred traditions. Take, for example, the Vestal Virgins of Rome, an order of priestesses dedicated to Vesta, the goddess of the hearth. Chosen as young girls, they underwent decades of strict training and were bound by vows of chastity. Their primary duty was to maintain the sacred fire of Vesta, a flame that symbolized the eternal life of Rome itself. Should the fire ever go out, it was believed to bring disaster upon the empire. The Vestals wielded immense influence, even advising senators and emperors, yet their power came with a heavy price. Breaking their vows could result in being buried alive, a testament to how seriously their role was regarded. The Vestals weren't just keepers of a flame, they were custodians of Rome's spiritual and political stability, embodying the sacred connection between the gods and the state. In the misty forests of ancient Celtic lands, the Druids held a similarly revered position. These spiritual leaders were not only priests, but also judges, healers, and keepers of oral traditions. Their training could last up to 20 years, during which they memorized vast amounts of knowledge, laws, histories, and rituals without writing anything down. This oral tradition ensured that their wisdom remained exclusive, passed only to the worthy. The Druids were deeply connected to nature, conducting ceremonies in sacred groves and using plants like mistletoe in their rituals, which they believed held potent magical properties. Their authority was so great that even kings sought their counsel, and their decisions could halt wars or dictate the course of entire communities. Yet, like the Vestals, their power was both respected and feared, as they were seen as the sole interpreters of the gods' will. Shamans, too, played a vital role in many ancient cultures, from the steppes of Siberia to the plains of the Americas. Unlike the institutionalized roles of priests and priestesses, shamans were often solitary figures, chosen by the spirits themselves through visions, dreams, or near-death experiences. Their training was intense and often painful, involving fasting, isolation, and encounters with otherworldly beings. Shamans acted as healers, guiding souls through illness or spiritual crises, and as mediators, negotiating with spirits to ensure the well-being of their communities. Their tools, drums, masks, and sacred herbs, were not mere props but conduits for their journeys into the spirit world. Through these rituals, they brought back knowledge, healing, and guidance, bridging the gap between the seen and the unseen. What secrets did these spiritual leaders take to their graves? The answer lies in the esoteric knowledge. They guarded knowledge that was often intentionally kept hidden to protect its power. The Vestals, for instance, were privy to rituals and prayers that were never written down, ensuring their sanctity. The Druids' refusal to record their teachings meant that much of their wisdom was lost with the decline of their culture. And the shamans' intimate connection to the spirit world meant that their insights were often deeply personal, passed on only to those deemed ready to receive them. This secrecy wasn't just about preserving power, it was about safeguarding the sacred from misuse or misunderstanding. The tools and symbols these spiritual leaders used were more than mere objects. They were extensions of their authority and their connection to the divine. The Vestal's sacred fire, the Druids' mistletoe, the shaman's drum, each carried profound symbolic meaning, representing the interplay between the material and the spiritual. These tools weren't just used in rituals, they were the very means by which the divine was made manifest in the human world. And as we turn our attention to these symbols, we'll uncover how they served as keys to unlocking the mysteries of the ancient world, revealing the profound ways in which humanity sought to understand and connect with the sacred. From the ceremonial daggers clutched by priests to the sacred masks worn by shamans, the tools of ancient rituals were far more than mere objects. They were keys to unlocking the language of the divine. Each item carried profound symbolic weight, serving as a bridge between the earthly and the spiritual realms. In the hands of the initiated, these tools transformed ordinary acts into extraordinary ceremonies, channeling the power of the gods and shielding against unseen threats. Consider the Ankh, one of the most recognizable symbols of ancient Egypt. This looped cross, often depicted in the hands of deities and pharaohs, symbolized eternal life and the union of male and female energies. It wasn't just a decorative emblem, it was a potent tool in rituals, believed to grant the bearer access to the mysteries of life, death, and rebirth. When held during ceremonies, the Ankh was thought to infuse the ritual with the divine breath of creation, empowering the participants to transcend their mortal limitations. Similarly, in Greek traditions, the caduceus, a staff entwined with two serpents, served as a symbol of healing and protection. Carried by Hermes, the messenger of the gods, it was believed to ward off evil and guide souls through transitions, whether in life or in death. These symbols weren't confined to their cultures of origin, they resonated across borders, appearing in various forms in different civilizations. The Ankh, for instance, finds echoes in the Christian cross, while the caduceus has parallels in the serpent-entwined staffs of other ancient cultures, such as the Sumerian god Ningish-Siddha. Ritual daggers, too, held deep significance. In many traditions, they weren't weapons of violence but instruments of transformation. The athame, a ceremonial dagger used in Wiccan and pagan rituals, was never meant to draw blood. Instead, it was used to direct energy, carve sacred symbols into the air, or mark the boundaries of ritual spaces. Its blade represented the power of the will, cutting through illusion and opening pathways to the divine. Even the materials used to craft these daggers, often bronze, silver, or obsidian, were chosen for their symbolic properties, believed to enhance their spiritual efficacy. Masks, another powerful ritual tool, were more than just disguises. They were vessels for transformation. In shamanic traditions, donning a mask allowed the wearer to embody a spirit or deity, becoming a conduit for their power. The mask wasn't just a representation, it was an invitation, a way for the divine to enter the human world. In African and Native American rituals, masks were used in healing ceremonies, dances, and rites of passage, each design carefully crafted to invoke specific energies or ancestors. The act of wearing a mask was a sacred exchange, a merging of identities that blurred the line between the mortal and the divine. Music and dance played a crucial role in amplifying the power of these tools. The rhythmic beat of drums, the haunting strains of flutes, and the hypnotic sway of dancers were not mere accompaniments to rituals, they were essential components. In ancient Greece, the dithyramb, a choral dance performed in honor of Dionysus, was believed to induce ecstatic states, allowing participants to commune with the god of wine and revelry. Similarly, in Native American traditions, the drum's steady pulse was thought to mimic the heartbeat of the earth, grounding participants and aligning them with the natural world. Dance, too, was a form of prayer, a way to embody the sacred stories and energies being invoked. Whether it was the whirling dervishes of Sufi mysticism or the intricate steps of the Egyptian temple dancers, movement transformed the body into a living symbol, a physical expression of spiritual truths. These tools and practices were more than just relics of the past. They were expressions of a universal human longing to connect with something greater than ourselves, to find meaning in the mysteries of existence. They remind us that the sacred is not distant or abstract. It is woven into the very fabric of our lives, waiting to be unlocked through the language of symbols, sounds, and movement. And as we continue our exploration, we'll see how these ancient practices have left their mark on the rituals and beliefs that shape our world today. In the flickering firelight of ancient gatherings, the air would often pulse with the steady beat of drums, the rise and fall of chants, and the rhythmic sway of bodies moving as one. Music and dance were not mere entertainment in these sacred spaces, they were the heartbeat of the ceremony, a vital force that transformed rituals into transcendent experiences. Across cultures and centuries, these elements were used to evoke trance-like states, forge deep communal bonds, and connect humanity with the divine. From the ecstatic dances of Dionysian rites to the solemn chants of funeral processions, music and dance were the threads that wove together the fabric of ancient spirituality. Take, for instance, the Dionysian Mysteries of ancient Greece. These rites, dedicated to Dionysus, the god of wine, fertility, and ecstasy, were renowned for their wild, uninhibited dances. Participants, known as Maenads, would abandon their everyday selves, surrendering to the rhythm of drums and flutes. The goal was to transcend the boundaries of the mortal world, to lose oneself in the divine frenzy of the god. Through their movements, they became one with Dionysus, embodying his power and experiencing a taste of his immortality. This wasn't just about celebration, it was about transformation, a way to step outside the confines of ordinary life and touch the sacred. But music and dance weren't limited to ecstatic worship. They also played a crucial role in marking the milestones of life. In ancient Egypt, for example, the rhythmic clapping and chanting of mourners accompanied funeral processions, guiding the deceased soul through the journey to the afterlife. The music wasn't just a backdrop, it was a form of spiritual guidance, a way to ease the soul's passage and honor the gods who presided over death and rebirth. Similarly, in many cultures, weddings were celebrated with elaborate dances and songs, symbolizing the union of two lives and the blessings of the divine. These performances weren't just for the couple, they were for the community, reinforcing social bonds and invoking the gods' favor for the new family. The power of music and dance lay in their ability to unite people, not just physically but emotionally and spiritually. When a group moved in unison to the beat of a drum or the melody of a chant, they became more than individuals. They became a collective, their hearts and minds aligned in a shared purpose. This sense of unity was especially important in societies where survival depended on cooperation and mutual support. Ritual dances often reenacted communal stories or myths, teaching values and reinforcing cultural identity. Through these movements, participants didn't just hear the stories of their ancestors, they lived them, embodying their struggles, triumphs, and connections to the divine. But how did music and dance bridge the gap between the mortal and the divine? The answer lies in their ability to alter consciousness, to shift participants from the realm of the ordinary into the extraordinary. Rhythmic drumming, for instance, has been shown to induce trance-like states, slowing brain waves and opening the mind to visions and spiritual experiences. Chants, with their repetitive phrases and melodic patterns, could focus the mind and elevate the spirit, creating a direct line of communication with the gods. Dance, too, was a form of embodied prayer, a way to physically express devotion and surrender to the sacred. Together, these elements created a multisensory experience that transcended words, allowing participants to connect with the divine on a visceral, emotional level. As we consider the role of music and dance in ancient ceremonies, it's impossible to ignore the offerings and sacrifices that often accompanied them. These acts of devotion were not just symbolic gestures, they were tangible expressions of gratitude, reverence, and hope. From the first fruits of the harvest to the precious oils poured on sacred altars, offerings were a way to give back to the gods, to acknowledge their power and seek their favor. And it's here, in the interplay of music, dance, and sacrifice, that will uncover the next layer of our journey into the lost legends and forgotten ceremonies of antiquity. In the ancient world, offerings and sacrifices were far more than mere acts of devotion. They were a language, a way for humanity to communicate with the divine. Whether it was a humble bowl of grain left at a village shrine, or the grandeur of 100 oxen slaughtered in a single ceremony, these gifts carried profound meaning. They were a tangible expression of gratitude, a plea for favor, and an acknowledgement of the gods' power. But what drove ancient societies to give so much, sometimes even the ultimate gift of life itself, to their deities? The answer lies in the delicate balance of reciprocity, a belief that the gods, like humans, thrived on mutual exchange. In ancient Greece, the practice of hecatombs, sacrificing 100 oxen, was a spectacle of devotion and a display of wealth and piety. These grand offerings were often made during festivals or in times of crisis, as a way to seek the gods' favor or appease their wrath. The act wasn't just about the quantity of the offering, it was about the intent behind it. The smoke rising from the altar was believed to carry the prayers of the people to the heavens, creating a bridge between the earthly and the divine. At the same time, these rituals reinforced social hierarchies, as only the wealthiest could afford such extravagant displays, solidifying their status as benefactors of both gods and men. Meanwhile, in the heart of Mesoamerica, the Aztecs took the concept of sacrifice to an entirely different level. To honor Huitzilopochtli, the god of sun and war, they offered the most precious gift of all, human life. These sacrifices were not acts of cruelty, but acts of necessity, rooted in the belief that the sun needed human blood to rise each day. The Aztecs saw themselves as stewards of the cosmos, responsible for maintaining the delicate balance between life and death. The rituals were communal events, involving elaborate processions, music, and dance, and they served to unify the people under a shared sense of purpose. Yet, they also highlighted the stark divisions within society, as the victims were often prisoners of war or individuals from conquered territories. The symbolism behind these offerings was deeply tied to the idea of reciprocity. Ancient people believed that the gods provided life, fertility, and protection, but these blessings came at a cost. Offerings were a way to repay this debt, to ensure that the flow of divine favor continued. Even the simplest acts, like pouring a libation of wine or burning incense, carried this meaning. The act of giving was a reminder of humanity's dependence on the gods and a way to reaffirm the sacred bond between the mortal and the divine. But not all offerings were equal. The type and scale of the gift often reflected the giver's social standing, reinforcing existing hierarchies. In many cultures, rulers or high priests were the ones who performed the most significant sacrifices, acting as intermediaries between the people and the gods. This role not only elevated their status but also legitimized their authority, as they were seen as the chosen vessels of divine will. At the same time, communal participation in these rituals, whether through attendance, singing, or dancing, fostered a sense of unity, binding individuals together through shared beliefs and practices. Yet, as we delve deeper into the world of ancient offerings, we must also confront the darker aspects of these practices. Human sacrifice, while rare in many cultures, was a stark reminder of the lengths to which societies would go to secure divine favor. The Aztecs were not alone in this practice. Evidence of human sacrifice has been found in ancient Carthage, among the Celts, and even in early Chinese civilizations. These acts were often reserved for moments of extreme crisis, such as famine, war, or natural disasters, when the stakes were highest and the need for divine intervention most urgent. While shocking to modern sensibilities, these sacrifices were rooted in a profound sense of responsibility, a belief that the survival of the community depended on the willingness to make the ultimate offering. As we reflect on these practices, it's worth asking, what can we learn from the ancient world's approach to offerings and sacrifices? At their core, these rituals reveal a universal human desire to connect with something greater than ourselves, to seek meaning and purpose in the face of life's uncertainties. They remind us that the sacred is not distant or abstract, but deeply intertwined with the rhythms of our lives. And as we turn our attention to the role of divination, the art of seeking guidance from the gods, we'll uncover how ancient societies sought to navigate the unknown, turning to the divine for answers in times of doubt and decision. In the shadowed corners of ancient rituals, where the line between devotion and desperation blurred, lies one of the most unsettling practices of all: human sacrifice. This was no mere act of violence, it was a profound statement of faith, a desperate plea to forces beyond human control. From the sun-scorched altars of Carthage to the misty heights of the Andes, societies across the globe turned to this ultimate offering in moments of crisis, believing that the gods demanded nothing less than life itself. But what drove these cultures to such extremes, and how did they reconcile the taking of life with their spiritual beliefs? Take, for instance, the Carthaginians, a civilization that thrived in the ancient Mediterranean. Their rituals to Baal Hammon, a god associated with fertility and protection, often involved the sacrifice of infants. Archaeological evidence from the Tophet, a sacred burial ground in Carthage, reveals thousands of urns containing the remains of young children. To modern eyes, this practice is horrifying, but to the Carthaginians, it was an act of profound responsibility. They believed that offering their most precious possession, their children, would ensure the survival of their city, its crops, and its people. The act was not one of cruelty but of necessity, a grim calculation in a world where survival often hinged on the whims of the gods. High in the Andes, the Inca practiced the Capacacha, a ceremony that marked significant events such as the death of an emperor or the onset of a natural disaster. Children, considered pure and untainted, were chosen as offerings to the gods. These young individuals were often treated as honored guests before their deaths, adorned in fine garments and given ceremonial feasts. Their sacrifice was seen as a way to maintain cosmic balance, ensuring the fertility of the land and the favor of the gods. The discovery of mummified remains, such as those of the Ice Maiden on Mount Ampato, offers a haunting glimpse into these rituals. Far from being acts of random violence, these sacrifices were carefully orchestrated, imbued with reverence and purpose. Yet, the psychological and societal impacts of these practices cannot be ignored. On one hand, they reinforced the authority of religious and political leaders, who were seen as the intermediaries between the people and the gods. These leaders often justified their power through their ability to perform such rituals, claiming that only they could secure the gods' favor. On the other hand, the act of sacrifice created a shared sense of purpose and unity, binding communities together in the face of uncertainty. The willingness to give up something, or someone precious, was a testament to the strength of their faith and their commitment to the greater good. But was this practice truly necessary? From a modern perspective, it's easy to view these rituals as barbaric, a reflection of a world governed by fear and superstition. Yet, for the societies that practiced them, they were a way of engaging with the divine, of asserting some measure of control over an unpredictable world. The act of sacrifice was not just about appeasing the gods, it was about reaffirming humanity's place in the cosmos, acknowledging the interconnectedness of life and death, fertility and famine, war and peace. As we reflect on these dark rituals, it's worth contrasting them with more life-affirming ceremonies, such as initiations. While human sacrifice often marked moments of crisis, initiations celebrated growth, transformation, and the passage from one stage of life to another. In ancient Greece, for example, the Eleusinian Mysteries offered participants a chance to experience the cycle of life, death, and rebirth through symbolic rituals, without the need for bloodshed. These ceremonies remind us that not all paths to the divine required such extreme measures, offering a glimpse into the lighter side of ancient spirituality. The practice of human sacrifice challenges us to grapple with the complexities of faith, morality, and survival. It forces us to ask difficult questions about the lengths to which people will go in search of meaning and security. And as we turn our attention to the next chapter of our exploration, we'll uncover how these ancient practices evolved, giving rise to new forms of ritual and belief that continue to shape our world today. Rites of passage have always been the threads that weave individuals into the fabric of their communities, marking the milestones of life with ceremonies steeped in symbolism and meaning. Birth, adulthood, and death, these universal transitions were not left to chance in the ancient world. Instead, they were carefully choreographed through rituals that transformed personal experiences into collective events, binding the individual to the larger story of their society. From the moment a child entered the world to the final breath that sent a soul into the afterlife, every step was guided by traditions that honored both the individual and the divine. Take, for example, the birth rituals of ancient Egypt. When a child was born, the family would often place amulets and charms around the infant's cradle, invoking the protection of gods like Bes and Taweret, deities associated with childbirth and guardianship. These objects weren't just decorative, they were believed to shield the newborn from malevolent spirits and ensure a healthy start to life. The act of naming the child was equally significant, as names were thought to carry power and destiny. A name wasn't just a label, it was a prayer, a wish for the child's future, and a connection to the divine. These early rituals set the tone for a life deeply intertwined with the sacred, where every achievement and challenge was seen as part of a larger cosmic plan. As children grew, many cultures marked their transition to adulthood with elaborate coming-of-age ceremonies. In ancient Sparta, the agoge, a rigorous training program for young boys, was more than just a test of physical endurance. It was a rite of passage designed to mold them into warriors and citizens. Boys as young as 7 were taken from their families and placed in communal barracks, where they learned discipline, loyalty, and the art of survival. The culmination of this training was a series of public challenges, where they had to prove their worth through acts of bravery and skill. These trials weren't just about showcasing strength, they were about forging identity, transforming boys into men who understood their place in Spartan society. The agoge wasn't just a personal journey, it was a communal one, reinforcing the values of a culture built on resilience and unity. But not all rites of passage were about endurance or achievement. In many cultures, the transition to adulthood was marked by symbolic acts that represented spiritual awakening. Among the Apache people, for instance, young girls underwent a 4-day ceremony known as the Sunrise Dance, which celebrated their passage into womanhood. Dressed in elaborate regalia and adorned with sacred symbols, they danced and prayed, embodying the spirit of changing woman, a figure central to Apache mythology. This ceremony wasn't just about the individual, it was about the community, as the entire tribe came together to honor the young woman and reaffirm their shared beliefs. Through this ritual, the girl was transformed, not just into an adult, but into a vital link in the chain of tradition, connecting past, present, and future. Death, too, was marked by ceremonies that transcended the personal, turning grief into a collective act of remembrance and reverence. The Egyptian mummification process is perhaps the most iconic example of this. Far from being a mere preservation technique, it was a deeply spiritual ritual designed to prepare the soul for its journey to the afterlife. Each step, from the removal of organs to the wrapping of the body in linen, was accompanied by prayers, incantations, and offerings. The Book of the Dead, a collection of spells and instructions, was often placed in the tomb to guide the deceased through the trials of the underworld. These rituals weren't just about honoring the dead, they were about ensuring their safe passage and maintaining the cosmic order. In this way, death became not an end, but a transition, a moment of transformation that echoed the cycles of nature. The symbolic elements of these rites, whether it was the masks worn by Apache girls, the sacred texts placed in Egyptian tombs, or the communal feasts held in honor of the deceased, were more than just decorations or traditions. They were tools for understanding, ways to make sense of the profound changes that define a human life. These rituals remind us that transitions are not just personal milestones, they are opportunities for connection, for reflection, and for growth. As we consider these ancient rites, it's worth asking, how do they compare to the milestones we celebrate today? While the specifics may have changed, the underlying purpose remains the same: to mark the journey of life, to honor the bonds that tie us together, and to seek meaning in the face of change. And as we turn our attention to the role of seasonal and cyclical ceremonies, we'll see how these ancient practices extended beyond the individual, shaping the rhythms of entire communities and connecting them to the eternal cycles of the natural world. The changing of the seasons was never just a shift in weather for ancient societies. It was a sacred dance, a rhythm that dictated the ebb and flow of life itself. From the first buds of spring to the frost of winter, every transition was marked by ceremonies that honored the cycles of nature and the celestial forces that governed them. These rituals weren't merely celebrations, they were acts of devotion, carefully timed to align with the movements of the sun, moon, and stars. For civilizations deeply tied to the land, the success of crops, the fertility of livestock, and the survival of the community depended on maintaining harmony with these natural rhythms. One of the most striking examples of seasonal celebration comes from ancient Rome, where the festival of Saturnalia brought the darkest days of winter to life with feasting, gift-giving, and a temporary reversal of social roles. For a week, slaves dined with their masters, and the rigid hierarchies of Roman society were set aside in honor of Saturn, the god of agriculture and time. This wasn't just a time of revelry, it was a symbolic reset, a way to acknowledge the end of one cycle and the beginning of another. The festival's timing, coinciding with the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, was no accident. It marked the return of the sun, a promise that light and warmth would come again, ensuring the renewal of life and the hope of a bountiful year ahead. Across the sea, in the misty hills of ancient Celtic lands, the festival of Samhain marked the end of the harvest season and the beginning of winter. Celebrated on the eve of November 1st, Samhain was a time when the veil between the worlds of the living and the dead was believed to be at its thinnest. Bonfires blazed and offerings were left for ancestors and spirits, ensuring their favor and protection during the harsh months to come. This festival wasn't just about honoring the dead, it was about preparing for the future, acknowledging the cyclical nature of life, death, and rebirth. The echoes of Samhain can still be felt today in modern Halloween traditions, a testament to the enduring power of these ancient rituals. But how did ancient societies track these cycles with such precision? The answer lies in their remarkable understanding of astronomy and timekeeping. The Mayans, for instance, developed the long count calendar, a complex system that measured time in cycles spanning thousands of years. This calendar wasn't just a tool for marking days, it was a way of understanding the cosmos, of predicting celestial events and aligning human activity with the rhythms of the universe. The Mayans believed that time was cyclical, that history repeated itself in grand patterns, and their ceremonies were designed to reflect this belief. Whether it was the planting of crops or the coronation of a king, every action was timed to coincide with these celestial cycles, ensuring that it was in harmony with the divine order. These seasonal and cyclical ceremonies served a dual purpose. On one hand, they were practical, ensuring that agricultural activities were timed correctly and that communities were prepared for the challenges of each season. On the other hand, they were deeply spiritual, reinforcing the belief that humanity was part of a larger cosmic order. By honoring the rhythms of nature, ancient societies sought to maintain balance, not just in their fields and homes, but in their relationship with the gods. Yet, even with their profound understanding of time and nature, the future remained uncertain. This is where divination came into play, offering a way to glimpse what lay ahead and make decisions with confidence. From the reading of animal entrails in ancient Rome to the casting of runes by Norse seers, divination was a bridge between the known and the unknown, a way to seek guidance from the divine. It wasn't just about prediction, it was about understanding the will of the gods and aligning human actions with their plans. As we explore this fascinating practice, we'll uncover how ancient societies turned to the unseen for answers, blending science, spirituality, and intuition in their quest to navigate the mysteries of life. In a world where the future often seemed as uncertain as the shifting winds, ancient societies turned to divination, a practice that bridged the gap between the mortal and the divine. Divination wasn't just about predicting what lay ahead, it was a way to seek clarity, to understand the will of the gods, and to make decisions with confidence. From the crackling flames of a sacred fire to the patterns left by spilled entrails, every method of divination carried its own language, a symbolic code that could be deciphered by those trained in its mysteries. These practices weren't just tools for the elite, They were woven into the fabric of everyday life, offering guidance to kings and commoners alike. One of the most iconic figures in the world of divination was the Pythia, the Oracle of Delphi. Seated on a tripod above a fissure in the earth, she inhaled vapors believed to connect her to Apollo, the god of prophecy. Her cryptic utterances, often delivered in a trance-like state, were interpreted by priests who translated her words into advice for those who sought her wisdom. Leaders from across the ancient world, kings, generals, and philosophers made the pilgrimage to Delphi, hoping to gain insight into matters of war, politics, and personal destiny. The oracle's influence was immense, shaping the course of empires and the lives of individuals. But what was the source of her power? Was it divine inspiration, or the result of careful observation and psychological manipulation? The answer, perhaps, lies somewhere in between, a blend of spiritual connection and human interpretation. Divination took many forms across cultures. In ancient Rome, the haruspics, a specialist in reading animal entrails, would examine the liver of a sacrificed animal for signs and omens. The shape, color, and markings of the organ were believed to reveal the god's will, offering guidance on everything from military campaigns to agricultural plans. Similarly, in China, the I Ching, or Book of Changes, provided a system of divination based on the casting of yarrow stalks or coins. The resulting hexagrams were interpreted as reflections of the cosmic balance, offering wisdom on how to navigate life's challenges. These methods, though vastly different in practice, shared a common goal: to bring order to chaos, to find meaning in the seemingly random events of life. Dreams, too, were seen as a powerful medium for divine communication. In ancient Egypt, dreams were considered messages from the gods, offering guidance or warnings. Temples dedicated to the god, Serapis, often included dream incubation chambers, where individuals would sleep in hopes of receiving a vision. The interpretation of dreams was a highly respected skill, with priests trained to decode the symbolic language of the subconscious. Even the pharaohs relied on dream interpreters to guide their decisions, trusting that the gods spoke through the veil of sleep. But divination wasn't just about seeking answers, it was also about finding comfort. In a world where disease, famine, and war were constant threats, the ability to consult the divine provided a sense of control, a way to confront uncertainty with hope. The rituals of divination, whether it was the casting of lots, the reading of omens, or the interpretation of dreams, offered a framework for understanding the world, a way to make sense of the inexplicable. They reminded people that they were not alone, that the gods were listening, and that even in the face of adversity, there was a path forward. As we reflect on these ancient practices, it's worth asking, how much of divination was genuine insight and how much was human interpretation? The line between the two is often blurred, as the rituals of divination were as much about faith as they were about fact. The symbols, the omens, the dreams, they were open to interpretation, shaped by the beliefs and experiences of those who sought their meaning. And yet, this very ambiguity may have been their strength, allowing individuals to find answers that resonated with their own lives and circumstances. This brings us to the role of sacred texts, which served as repositories of ancient wisdom and divine guidance. From the Vedas of India to the Torah of the Israelites, these texts were more than just collections of stories and laws. They were living documents meant to be studied, interpreted, and applied to the challenges of daily life. The preservation of these texts was a sacred duty, ensuring that the wisdom of the past could guide future generations. As we explore these ancient writings, we'll uncover how they shaped the beliefs and practices of the societies that revered them, offering a glimpse into the enduring quest for meaning and connection. From the whispered chants of bards around crackling fires to the meticulously inscribed hieroglyphs on temple walls, the transmission of ancient wisdom was a sacred act, one that spanned both the spoken and written word. Sacred texts and oral traditions were the lifeblood of civilizations, preserving not just stories but the very essence of what it meant to belong to a culture, to understand the world, and to connect with the divine. Whether etched into clay tablets, painted on papyrus, or sung in the cadence of a storyteller's voice, these traditions were more than mere records. They were living bridges between the past, present, and future. Take, for example, the Vedas, the ancient scriptures of India. Composed in Sanskrit over 3,000 years ago, these texts are among the oldest and most revered in human history. The Vedas weren't just religious documents, they were a comprehensive guide to life, encompassing hymns, rituals, philosophy, and even early forms of science. Passed down orally for centuries before being written, their preservation relied on the precise memorization of countless verses, a feat achieved through rigorous training and unwavering discipline. The Vedas shaped not only spiritual practices, but also the social and cultural fabric of ancient India, offering insights into everything from cosmology to ethics. They remind us that sacred texts were never static. They evolved, adapted, and resonated with each generation that encountered them. In ancient Egypt, the Book of the Dead served a similar purpose, though its focus was more personal. This collection of spells, prayers, and instructions was designed to guide the deceased through the trials of the afterlife. Written on papyrus scrolls and often buried with the dead, these texts were both practical and profoundly spiritual. They weren't just meant to be read, they were meant to be enacted, with each spell serving as a tool to navigate the dangers of the underworld and achieve eternal life. The Book of the Dead reveals how ancient Egyptians viewed death not as an end but as a journey, one that required preparation, knowledge, and the blessings of the gods. It's a testament to the power of the written word to transcend mortality itself, but not all wisdom was etched into stone or inscribed on parchment. In many cultures, oral traditions were the primary means of preserving knowledge. Among the Norse, the Edda's collections of myths, poems, and legends were passed down through generations by skalds or bards. These storytellers were more than entertainers, they were the keepers of history, the guardians of cultural identity. Through their vivid retellings of tales like the creation of the world from the body of the giant Ymir or the exploits of Thor and Odin, they brought the gods to life, making the divine accessible and relatable. The oral tradition allowed these stories to remain fluid, adapting to the needs and values of each new audience while retaining their core truths. The role of bards and storytellers extended beyond mere preservation. They were also educators, shaping the moral and spiritual framework of their societies. In ancient Greece, the epic poems of Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey, were recited at festivals and gatherings, teaching listeners about heroism, loyalty, and the complexities of human nature. These stories weren't just entertainment, they were lessons in how to live, how to face adversity, and how to honor the gods. The oral tradition ensured that these lessons were not confined to the elite, but were accessible to all, weaving the values of the culture into the fabric of everyday life. How did these texts and traditions shape the spiritual and cultural identity of ancient societies? They provided a shared language, a common set of symbols and stories that bound people together. They offered a way to make sense of the world, to find meaning in the chaos of existence, and perhaps most importantly, they connected individuals to something greater than themselves, whether it was the gods, the cosmos, or the collective memory of their ancestors. These traditions were not just about preserving the past, they were about ensuring the future, passing on the wisdom needed to navigate an uncertain world. As we turn our attention to the role of art and iconography, we'll see how these beliefs found expression not just in words, but in images, paintings, sculptures, and symbols that conveyed the sacred in ways that transcended language. From the intricate carvings of Hindu temples to the haunting frescoes of Egyptian tombs, art became another medium through which the divine was made visible, tangible, and immediate. It's here, in the interplay of text, tradition, and imagery, that will uncover the next layer of our journey into the lost legends and forgotten ceremonies of antiquity. Art has always been one of humanity's most powerful tools for expressing the sacred, a way to make the intangible tangible and the divine visible. In the ancient world, art wasn't just decoration, it was a language, a medium through which gods, myths, and rituals came to life. From the hauntingly beautiful cave paintings of Lascaux to the intricate carvings adorning Hindu temples, every stroke of the brush and chisel mark carried meaning, transforming stone and pigment into vessels of spiritual connection. Through art, ancient cultures didn't just depict their gods, they invited them into the world, creating spaces where the sacred could be experienced, not just imagined. Consider the statues of Athena, the Greek goddess of wisdom and warfare. These weren't mere representations, they were embodiments of her divine presence. Sculptors paid meticulous attention to details like her helmet, shield, and the owl perched on her shoulder, symbols that conveyed her attributes and power. The posture of these statues, often depicted as standing tall and commanding, communicated authority and protection, reminding worshippers of her role as a guardian of cities like Athens. Even the materials used, such as ivory and gold, were chosen for their association with purity and immortality, reinforcing the goddess's divine nature. Through these artistic choices, Athena wasn't just a distant deity, she was a tangible force, her presence felt in the very stones of her temples. Color, too, played a vital role in ancient iconography. In the vibrant murals of Pompeii, for instance, the use of rich reds, deep blues, and gleaming golds wasn't just about aesthetic appeal, it was a way to symbolize the divine and the eternal. These colors were often derived from precious materials like lapis lazuli and gold leaf, elevating their significance. The frescoes depicting Dionysus, the god of wine and ecstasy, often showed him surrounded by lush vineyards and revelers, his figure bathed in warm, golden hues. This wasn't just a celebration of his domain, it was an invitation to experience his divine energy, to feel the joy and abandon he represented. Art, in this sense, was a bridge between the human and the divine, a way to bring the sacred into everyday life. But art wasn't just about devotion, it was also a tool for education. In ancient Egypt, the walls of tombs and temples were covered with hieroglyphs and images that told stories of the gods, the afterlife, and the proper conduct for a righteous life. These carvings and paintings weren't just for the elite, they were a way to teach all who saw them about the values and beliefs of their culture. The scenes of Osiris presiding over the weighing of the heart, for example, weren't just decorative. They were instructional, guiding the deceased through the trials of the afterlife and reinforcing the importance of moral integrity. Art, in this context, was a teacher, a way to pass down knowledge and ensure the continuity of tradition. The symbolic meanings behind these representations often extended beyond the individual figures to include their surroundings. In Hindu temples, the intricate carvings of deities like Shiva or Vishnu are often set within elaborate mandalas, geometric patterns that represent the cosmos. These designs aren't just decorative, they're meant to evoke a sense of wholeness and harmony, reflecting the belief that the divine is present in all things. The lotus flower, a common motif in both Hindu and Buddhist art, symbolizes purity and enlightenment, rising from muddy waters to bloom in perfect beauty. These symbols served as visual prayers, reminders of the divine potential within every individual. As we explore these artistic expressions, it's clear that art was more than just a reflection of belief. It was an active participant in the spiritual life of ancient cultures. Through statues, murals, and carvings, the divine was made accessible, the sacred made visible, and this interplay between art and spirituality often reached its zenith in the festivals and communal celebrations that brought entire communities together. These events weren't just about honoring the gods, they were about creating moments of shared experience, where the boundaries between the earthly and the divine dissolved, and the sacred became a living, breathing presence in the lives of all who participated. Festivals and communal celebrations were the heartbeat of ancient societies, pulsing with life, color, and meaning. They weren't just moments of joy or spectacle, they were vital threads weaving individuals into the fabric of their communities. These events brought people together in ways that transcended daily life, creating spaces where the sacred and the secular intertwined, and where cultural identity was both celebrated and reinforced. From the grandeur of the Olympic Games to the raucous revelry of the Roman Lupercalia, these gatherings were more than entertainment. They were expressions of shared values, priorities, and a collective sense of belonging. Take the Olympic Games, for example. While we often associate them with athletic prowess today, their origins in ancient Greece were deeply spiritual. Held every 4 years in honor of Zeus, the Games were not just a test of strength and skill, but a sacred ritual. Athletes competed not for personal glory but to honor the gods, and the entire Greek world observed a truce during the Games, setting aside conflicts to celebrate unity and peace. The Olympic Games were a microcosm of Greek ideals, balance, harmony, and the pursuit of excellence, but they were also a reminder of the shared heritage that bound the city-states together. Even in their diversity, the Greeks found common ground in these moments of collective celebration. In Rome, the Lupercalia festival offered a different kind of unity, one rooted in both myth and practicality. Celebrated in mid-February, this festival honored Lupercus, a god associated with fertility and protection. The rituals were lively and often chaotic, involving the sacrifice of goats and dogs, followed by young men running through the streets, striking bystanders with strips of hide. While it may sound strange to modern ears, this act was believed to promote fertility and cleanse the city of evil spirits. The Lupercalia wasn't just about religion, it was about community. It brought people together in laughter and spectacle, breaking down social barriers and fostering a sense of shared identity. Over time, elements of the Lupercalia even found their way into modern Valentine's Day traditions, a testament to the enduring power of these ancient celebrations. Food, music, and competition were central to these festivals, serving as universal languages that transcended class, status, and even language itself. In ancient Egypt, the festival of Apep celebrated the rejuvenation of the pharaoh and the fertility of the land. The streets of Thebes came alive with processions, feasting, and music, as statues of the gods Amun, Mut, and Khonsu were paraded from one temple to another. The abundance of food and drink wasn't just a symbol of prosperity. It was a way to include everyone in the celebration, from the wealthiest noble to the humblest farmer. Similarly, in the Mayan ball game, competition was both a sport and a ritual, often tied to cosmological events. The game wasn't just about winning, it was about reenacting the struggles of the gods and reinforcing the balance between order and chaos. These celebrations were more than just moments of joy, they were mirrors reflecting the values and priorities of ancient societies. The Greeks valued excellence and unity, the Romans sought protection and fertility, and the Egyptians celebrated renewal and abundance. Each festival was a way to reaffirm what mattered most, to remind people of their place in the world and their connection to one another. But beneath the surface of these public celebrations lay another layer of spiritual life, one that was more intimate, more secretive, and often more profound. Mystery cults, with their exclusive rituals and hidden knowledge, offered a different kind of belonging, one that transcended the communal and touched the deeply personal. It's here, in the shadows of these ancient traditions, that we'll uncover the next chapter of our journey into the lost legends and forgotten ceremonies of antiquity. Beneath the surface of public festivals and communal celebrations lay a hidden world of spiritual exploration, the mystery cults. These exclusive groups offered something far more personal than the grand spectacles of public worship, a promise of transformation, divine knowledge, and a direct connection to the sacred. Unlike the open rituals of state religions, mystery cults were shrouded in secrecy, their teachings and practices known only to those who underwent rigorous initiation. For those who sought deeper meaning and a more intimate relationship with the divine, these cults provided a path unlike any other. One of the most famous of these was the Eleusinian Mysteries, a centuries-old tradition centered around the myth of Demeter and Persephone. Held in the town of Eleusis near Athens, these rites promised initiates a glimpse into the mysteries of life, death, and rebirth. The exact details of the ceremonies remain unknown. Initiates were sworn to secrecy under penalty of death, but what we do know is that the experience was said to be life-changing. Participants emerged with a profound sense of enlightenment, having been touched by the divine in a way that transcended ordinary worship. The Eleusinian Mysteries weren't just about belief, they were about experience, about feeling the sacred in a deeply personal way. Equally enigmatic was the cult of Mithras, which flourished in the Roman Empire, particularly among soldiers. This all-male group worshipped Mithras, a god of light and truth, often depicted slaying a bull, a symbolic act representing the triumph of good over evil and the renewal of life. Initiates progressed through a series of ranks, each with its own rituals and tests, culminating in a transformative experience that mirrored Mithras's own journey. The cult's underground temples, or Mithria, were intimate spaces adorned with celestial imagery, creating an atmosphere of otherworldly connection. For those who joined, the cult of Mithras wasn't just a religion, it was a brotherhood, a shared journey towards spiritual awakening. What drew people to these exclusive and often dangerous groups? The answer lies in their promise of something greater than the rituals of everyday life. In a world where most religious practices were tied to civic duty or social obligation, mystery cults offered a chance for personal transformation. They appealed to individuals seeking a deeper connection to the divine, a sense of belonging that went beyond the surface-level interactions of public worship. The secrecy of these groups added to their allure, creating an air of exclusivity and prestige. To be initiated was to be part of something special, something profound. But the appeal of mystery cults wasn't just spiritual, it was also social. In a society where status and identity were often rigidly defined, these groups offered a sense of equality and camaraderie. Within the walls of a Mithraeum or the sacred precincts of Eleusis, a soldier, a merchant, and a slave could stand side by side, united by their shared quest for enlightenment. This leveling of social hierarchies was rare in the ancient world, and it added to the cult's magnetic pull. They weren't just about connecting with the gods, they were about connecting with one another in a way that transcended the divisions of everyday life. The initiation rites themselves were often intense, designed to push initiates beyond their comfort zones and into a state of heightened awareness. In the Eleusinian Mysteries, for example, participants may have undergone fasting, purification rituals, and dramatic reenactments of the Demeter-Persephone myth. These experiences were meant to evoke powerful emotions, breaking down the barriers between the self and the divine. The secrecy surrounding these rites only deepened their impact, making the knowledge gained feel all the more sacred and profound. As we reflect on the allure of these mystery cults, it's worth considering the role of women in ancient spiritual practices. While many cults, like the cult of Mithras, were exclusively male, others, such as the Eleusinian Mysteries, welcomed women and even placed them in positions of prominence. The priestesses of Demeter, for instance, played a central role in the Eleusinian rites, guiding initiates through the sacred ceremonies and embodying the goddess's nurturing and transformative power. Women weren't just participants in these rituals, they were leaders, shaping the spiritual lives of their communities in ways that were both powerful and profound. This blending of gender roles in certain cults highlights the complexity of ancient spirituality, offering a glimpse into a world where the divine was not confined by earthly boundaries. In the tapestry of ancient rituals, women wove threads of power, wisdom, and healing roles that often went far beyond the domestic spheres typically assigned to them. From the revered priestesses of Demeter to the enigmatic Sibyls of Greece, women held sacred positions that shaped the spiritual and cultural landscapes of their societies. These roles weren't just ceremonial, they were transformative, offering women avenues of influence and autonomy in a world that often sought to confine them. Take the Sibyls, for instance. These prophetic women, scattered across the ancient Mediterranean, were believed to channel the voices of the gods, delivering messages that could alter the course of history. The most famous among them, the Sibyl of Cumae, was said to guide Aeneas through the underworld in Virgil's Aeneid. Her prophecies weren't just poetic embellishments, they were sought after by kings and emperors, her words carrying the weight of divine authority. The Sibyl's ability to interpret the will of the gods gave them a unique form of power, one that transcended the limitations placed on women in their societies. Their voices, though often shrouded in metaphor, were heard and heeded, a testament to the respect they commanded. The Vestal Virgins of Rome offer another striking example. Chosen as young girls, these priestesses dedicated their lives to Vesta, the goddess of the hearth. Their primary duty was to maintain the sacred fire of Rome, a flame that symbolized the eternal life of the empire. But their role extended far beyond the temple. The Vestals enjoyed privileges unheard of for most women in Rome. They could own property, make wills, and even influence political decisions. Their chastity, far from being a limitation, was seen as a source of power, a purity that connected them directly to the divine. Yet, this freedom came with a heavy price. The punishment for breaking their vows, being buried alive, underscored the immense responsibility and scrutiny they carried. The Vestals were both revered and feared, their lives a delicate balance of privilege and peril. In ancient Egypt, women also held prominent spiritual roles, particularly as priestesses of Hathor, the goddess of love, music, and fertility. These women were not only religious leaders but also healers, using their knowledge of herbs and rituals to treat the sick and comfort the dying. Their role as intermediaries between the human and the divine gave them a unique status, one that allowed them to navigate both the spiritual and practical realms of their communities. The priestesses of Hathor remind us that healing in the ancient world was as much about spiritual well-being as it was about physical health. But how did these roles empower women in societies that were often deeply patriarchal? For one, they provided a space where women could exercise authority and gain respect, often on par with their male counterparts. Priestesses and oracles were seen as vessels of divine wisdom, their words and actions carrying a weight that went beyond their gender. These roles also offered women a degree of independence, allowing them to own property, make decisions, and influence their communities in ways that were otherwise denied to them. In a world where women's lives were often tightly controlled, these positions provided a rare opportunity for autonomy and self-expression. Yet, the freedoms these roles afforded were not without their complexities. The Vestals, for example, were both celebrated and confined, their power inextricably tied to their chastity and obedience. The Sibyls, while revered, often lived in isolation, their prophetic gifts setting them apart from the rest of society. Even the priestesses of Hathor, though influential, were bound by the expectations of their roles, their lives dedicated to serving the goddess and their communities. These women navigated a delicate balance, wielding power within the constraints of their time. As we reflect on the roles of women in ancient rituals, it's impossible not to wonder how their stories might have shaped the broader narrative of history. Their contributions remind us that spirituality and power were not the exclusive domain of men, and that women have always played a vital role in shaping the sacred and the secular. And as we turn our attention to the role of animals in ancient ceremonies, we'll see how these creatures, whether as symbols, sacrifices, or sacred companions, added yet another layer of meaning to the rituals that define the ancient world. Animals have always held a unique place in the spiritual imagination of humanity, serving as bridges between the earthly and the divine, the mundane and the sacred. In ancient ceremonies, they were more than mere participants. They were symbols, messengers, and sometimes even sacrifices, embodying the hopes, fears, and beliefs of the cultures that revered them. From the sacred cows of Hinduism to the sacrificial lambs of Greek traditions, animals played a central role in rituals that sought to connect humans with the gods. But what made these creatures so significant, and how did their roles reflect the values and priorities of the societies that honored them? In ancient Egypt, the Apis bull was more than just an animal. It was a living embodiment of the god Ptah, a divine presence on earth. Chosen for its distinctive markings, a white triangle on its forehead and a crescent moon on its side, the bull was treated with the utmost reverence, housed in a temple and cared for by priests. When the Apis bull died, it was mummified and buried with great ceremony, and a new bull was chosen to take its place. This cycle of life, death, and renewal mirrored the Egyptian understanding of the cosmos, where the divine was never distant but always present in the natural world. The Apis bull wasn't just a symbol of power and fertility, it was a reminder of the eternal connection between the gods and humanity. Meanwhile, in the sun-drenched temples of ancient Greece, the sacrificial lamb held a different kind of significance. Offered to gods like Zeus or Apollo, the lamb was a gift, a way to seek favor or atone for wrongdoing. The act of sacrifice was deeply symbolic, with the animal's life seen as a substitute for the life of the worshipper. The blood of the lamb, spilled on the altar, was believed to carry the prayers of the people to the heavens, creating a direct line of communication with the divine. This practice wasn't unique to Greece. Similar rituals could be found across the ancient world, from the Levant to Mesopotamia, each culture imbuing the act with its own meaning and symbolism. But animals weren't always sacrificed. Sometimes they were revered as sacred beings in their own right. In Hinduism, the cow has long been considered a symbol of life and abundance, embodying the nurturing qualities of the earth itself. Killing a cow was, and still is, seen as a grave sin, a violation of the sacred bond between humans and nature. This reverence reflects a broader understanding of animals as part of a cosmic order, where every creature has a role to play and a sacred purpose to fulfill. The cow, in this context, is not just an animal, it is a living reminder of the interconnectedness of all life. The sacred snakes of Crete offer another fascinating example. In Minoan culture, snakes were associated with renewal and transformation, their ability to shed their skin symbolizing rebirth and regeneration. Statuettes of snake-wielding priestesses suggest that these creatures were central to rituals aimed at invoking the goddess's power and ensuring the fertility of the land. The snake, with its dual symbolism of danger and healing, was a potent reminder of the delicate balance between life and death, growth and decay. These practices raise important ethical questions, particularly from a modern perspective. The use of animals in ancient rituals often involved acts of violence, justified by the belief that the gods demanded such offerings. Yet, for the people of the time, these acts were not seen as cruel but as necessary, a way to maintain the balance between the human and divine realms. The cultural implications of these practices are profound, revealing how deeply intertwined spirituality and survival were in the ancient world. Animals, in this context, were not just tools or symbols. They were partners in the sacred dance of life, their roles reflecting the values, fears, and aspirations of the societies that honored them. As we consider the role of animals in ancient ceremonies, it's worth reflecting on how these practices might have shaped the spiritual lives of those who participated in them. The act of sacrifice, for instance, required a deep level of commitment and faith, a willingness to give up something of value in the hope of divine favor. The reverence for sacred animals, on the other hand, demanded a respect for the natural world, an acknowledgement of the sacredness of all life. These practices remind us that spirituality in the ancient world was not just about belief, it was about action, about making the sacred tangible through rituals that connected individuals to something greater than themselves. This brings us to the role of dreams and visions in ancient spirituality, another way in which the divine communicated with humanity. Dreams, like animals, were seen as messengers, carrying insights and warnings from the gods. From the dream interpreters of Egypt to the visionary shamans of the Americas, these experiences were not dismissed as mere figments of the imagination, but were treated as profound sources of wisdom. As we explore this next layer of ancient spirituality, we'll see how dreams and visions offered a different kind of connection to the divine, one that was deeply personal and often transformative. In the quiet hours of the night, when the veil between worlds seemed thinnest, ancient cultures believed that dreams and visions offered a direct line to the divine. These experiences were not dismissed as mere figments of the imagination, but were revered as profound messages from the gods, glimpses into other realms, or even prophecies of the future. From the temples of Asclepius in Greece to the shamanic practices of the Americas, dreams and visions were seen as sacred tools, guiding individuals and communities through the mysteries of life and beyond. One of the most fascinating examples of this belief comes from ancient Greece, where the temples of Asclepius served as sanctuaries for dream incubation. Those seeking healing or guidance would travel to these sacred sites, often after making offerings or undergoing purification rituals. Once inside, they would sleep in the abaton, a special chamber where it was believed the god Asclepius would visit them in their dreams. These nocturnal encounters weren't just symbolic, they were transformative. The god might appear and perform a healing miracle, or he might offer cryptic instructions for treatment. The dreamers would awaken and share their visions with the temple priests, who interpreted the messages and prescribed remedies. This practice wasn't just about physical healing, it was about spiritual renewal, a way to reconnect with the divine and find meaning in suffering. But dreams weren't the only way ancient cultures accessed the divine. In many traditions, hallucinogens were used to induce visions, opening the mind to realms beyond ordinary perception. The shamans of the Amazon, for instance, consumed ayahuasca, a potent brew made from the Banisteriopsis caapi vine, to commune with spirits and gain insights into the natural and supernatural worlds. These visions weren't seen as mere hallucinations, but as journeys into the sacred, where the shaman could negotiate with spirits, heal the sick, or divine the future. Similarly, in ancient Mesoamerica, the use of peyote and psilocybin mushrooms in religious ceremonies allowed participants to experience the gods directly, their visions reinforcing communal beliefs and strengthening social bonds. These practices remind us that the boundaries between the physical and spiritual worlds were often fluid, with altered states of consciousness serving as bridges to the divine. How did these experiences shape personal and communal beliefs? For individuals, dreams and visions could be deeply transformative, offering clarity in times of confusion or hope in moments of despair. A dream might reveal a hidden truth, inspire a new path, or confirm one's connection to the divine. On a communal level, these experiences reinforced shared beliefs, creating a sense of unity and purpose. The visions of shamans, for instance, often guided entire communities, influencing decisions about hunting, warfare, or agriculture. In this way, dreams and visions weren't just personal revelations, they were collective resources, shaping the spiritual and practical lives of entire cultures. Yet, the role of dreams and visions wasn't confined to the living. In many traditions, they were also seen as pathways to the afterlife, offering glimpses of what lay beyond death. The ancient Egyptians, for example, believed that dreams could provide guidance for the soul's journey through the underworld. Texts like the Book of the Dead included instructions for navigating the afterlife, many of which were thought to be revealed through dreams. Similarly, in Norse mythology, the god Odin was said to gain wisdom from the dreams of the dead, consulting them in his quest for knowledge. These beliefs highlight the interconnectedness of life, death, and the divine, with dreams serving as a bridge between realms. As we reflect on the role of dreams and visions in ancient spirituality, it's worth considering how these practices resonate with us today. In a world that often dismisses the unseen, the ancient reverence for dreams reminds us of the power of the subconscious, the mysteries of the mind, and the enduring human desire to connect with something greater than ourselves. And as we turn our attention to the role of death and the afterlife in ancient ceremonies, we'll see how these cultures approached the ultimate mystery, crafting rituals that honored the dead and celebrated the continuity of life. For ancient cultures, death wasn't an end but a transition, a journey into a realm as mysterious and complex as life itself. From the grand pyramids of Egypt to the silent warriors of China's terracotta army, the rituals surrounding death were as much about honoring the deceased as they were about ensuring their safe passage into the afterlife. These practices weren't just acts of mourning, they were acts of preparation, designed to equip the departed with everything they would need for the challenges and rewards of the world beyond. But what did these rituals reveal about how ancient societies viewed life, death, and the eternal, and how did they use material objects, tombs, grave goods, and sacred ceremonies to bridge the gap between the mortal and the divine? In ancient Egypt, the afterlife was a meticulously planned destination, and the journey there required careful preparation. The Egyptians believed that death was merely a doorway to a new existence, one that mirrored life on earth but was free from its struggles. To ensure a smooth transition, they developed elaborate funerary practices, the most famous of which was mummification. This process wasn't just about preserving the body, it was about preparing it for resurrection. The organs were carefully removed and stored in canopic jars, each protected by a specific deity, while the body was treated with natron and wrapped in linen, transforming it into a vessel for the soul. But the journey didn't end there. The opening of the mouth ceremony, performed by priests, was a crucial ritual that reanimated the body, allowing the deceased to eat, drink, and speak in the afterlife. This act wasn't just symbolic, it was a way to ensure that the dead could thrive in the next world, their needs met and their spirits intact. The tombs themselves were more than resting places, they were eternal homes, filled with everything the deceased might need. From food and clothing to furniture and jewelry, grave goods were carefully selected to provide comfort and status in the afterlife. The walls of these tombs were often adorned with paintings and hieroglyphs depicting scenes of daily life, offerings to the gods, and spells from the Book of the Dead. These images weren't just decorative, they were functional, serving as magical representations that could come to life in the next world. The tomb, in this sense, was a microcosm of the afterlife, a carefully curated space where the deceased could continue their existence in harmony with the divine. But Egyptian funerary practices weren't unique in their grandeur. Halfway across the world, the Vikings also prepared their dead for the journey beyond, though their approach was strikingly different. For the Norse, the afterlife was a place of feasting and glory, and the way one died determined their destination. Warriors who fell in battle were believed to go to Valhalla, Odin's hall, where they would feast and fight until the end of days. To honor these warriors, the Vikings conducted ship burials, placing the deceased in a vessel surrounded by their weapons, treasures, and even sacrificed animals. The ship was then set ablaze or buried, symbolizing the journey to the afterlife. These burials weren't just about honoring the dead, they were about ensuring their place among the gods, their valor recognized, and their spirits celebrated. In ancient China, the afterlife was equally significant, though the approach was more about continuity than transformation. The terracotta army, buried with the first emperor Qin Shi Huang, is one of the most striking examples of this belief. Thousands of life-sized clay soldiers, each with unique features, were placed in the emperor's tomb to protect him in the afterlife. This army wasn't just a show of power, it was a reflection of the emperor's desire to maintain his authority even in death. Alongside the soldiers, the tomb contained replicas of palaces, rivers of mercury, and countless artifacts, all designed to recreate the emperor's earthly life in the next world. The Chinese believed that the afterlife was an extension of this one, and the care taken in preparing the tomb reflected their commitment to ensuring the deceased's comfort and status for eternity. These practices, though varied in form, reveal a common thread, a deep respect for the dead and a profound belief in the continuity of existence. Whether it was the Egyptian emphasis on resurrection, the Viking celebration of valor, or the Chinese focus on eternal rule, each culture crafted rituals that reflected its values and worldview. These funerary practices weren't just about mourning, they were about affirming the bonds between the living and the dead, the earthly and the divine. Yet, the preparation for the afterlife wasn't just a matter of physical objects and rituals. It often involved the use of magic and sorcery. Spells, incantations, and protective amulets were common features of funerary practices, designed to ward off evil spirits and ensure the deceased's safe passage. In Egypt, the Book of the Dead was filled with spells to help the soul navigate the trials of the underworld, while in other cultures, shamans or priests might perform rituals to guide the dead to their final resting place. These practices remind us that death, for the ancients, was not just a physical event but a spiritual one, requiring not only material preparation but also magical intervention. As we explore these ancient beliefs and practices, it's impossible not to marvel at the depth of their understanding and the lengths they went to honor the dead. These rituals weren't just about fear of the unknown, they were about hope for a better existence, hope for continuity, and hope for connection. And as we turn our attention to the role of magic and sorcery in ancient rituals, we'll uncover how these practices shaped not only the journey to the afterlife, but also the lives of those who remained behind. Magic and sorcery were the hidden currents running through the spiritual lives of ancient civilizations, weaving together threads of power, fear, and hope. Unlike the structured rituals of organized religion, magic was often deeply personal, a way for individuals to tap into the unseen forces that shaped their world. From the protective amulets worn by Egyptian mothers to the curses etched onto lead tablets in Roman cities, magic was a tool for navigating life's uncertainties. But where did religion end and magic begin? For many ancient cultures, the line between the two was fluid, as both sought to connect humanity with the divine, or to bend it to human will. Take the Greek magical papyri, a collection of spells and rituals dating back to the Greco-Roman period. These texts reveal a world where magic was as much a part of daily life as prayer or sacrifice. One spell might call on the gods to heal a sick child, while another might invoke darker forces to curse an enemy. The papyri weren't just about power, they were about control, offering individuals a way to influence their fate in a world that often felt unpredictable. Yet this power came with risks. Magic was a double-edged sword, capable of both protecting and harming its practitioners. A poorly worded spell or an ill-timed ritual could backfire, bringing misfortune instead of blessings. This duality made magic both revered and feared, a force that could uplift or destroy. In the frostbitten lands of the Norse, runes served a similar purpose. These ancient symbols, carved into stone, wood, or bone, were more than just letters, they were conduits of magic. A rune inscribed on a sword might grant its bearer strength in battle, while one etched into a household object could protect against evil spirits. The Norse believed that runes held the power of the gods themselves, their shapes imbued with the energy of creation. Yet, like the spells of the Greek magical papyri, runes were not to be used lightly. Misusing them could anger the gods or unleash unintended consequences, a reminder that magic demanded respect and skill. The societal attitudes toward magic users were as varied as the cultures they came from. In some cases, practitioners were revered as wise men and women, their knowledge of the supernatural seen as a gift from the gods. The Druids of Celtic lands, for example, were both religious leaders and magicians, their rituals blending spirituality with sorcery. They were respected for their wisdom, feared for their power, and often consulted in matters of war, health, and governance. Yet in other contexts, magic users were viewed with suspicion. their abilities seen as dangerous or even demonic. In ancient Rome, for instance, accusations of witchcraft could lead to exile or execution, as magic was often associated with treachery and rebellion. This tension between reverence and fear raises an important question. How did magic both empower and endanger its practitioners? For those who mastered its secrets, magic offered a way to transcend the limitations of ordinary life, to heal, protect, and influence the world around them. But this power came at a cost. Magic users often lived on the fringes of society, their abilities setting them apart from others. They were both sought after and shunned, their knowledge a source of both strength and vulnerability. This delicate balance reflects the broader human struggle to understand and control the forces that shape our lives. As we delve deeper into the mysteries of ancient magic, it's impossible to ignore the role of the stars. Astronomy and astrology were deeply intertwined with magic and religion, offering another lens through which ancient societies sought to understand the divine. The movements of the planets, the cycles of the moon, and the patterns of the stars were seen as messages from the gods, a celestial language waiting to be deciphered. In the next part of our journey, we'll explore how these cosmic forces shaped ancient beliefs, from the birth of astrology in Mesopotamia to the celestial alignments of temples across the globe. The heavens, like magic, were a way to glimpse the infinite, to connect with the sacred, and to find meaning in the mysteries of existence. The night sky has always been humanity's first map, a vast and shimmering canvas that ancient cultures used to navigate not only the physical world, but also the spiritual one. Long before telescopes or satellites, the stars were more than just points of light. They were guides, calendars, and messengers of the gods. From the towering stones of Stonehenge to the intricate star charts of the Babylonians, ancient civilizations looked to the heavens for answers, weaving the movements of the cosmos into the very fabric of their rituals and beliefs. But how did these celestial patterns shape the way people understood their place in the universe? And what secrets did the stars hold for those who knew how to read them? One of the most striking examples of this celestial connection can be found in Stonehenge, the enigmatic stone circle that has stood on England's Salisbury Plain for thousands of years. While its exact purpose remains a mystery, its alignment with the summer and winter solstices suggests a deep understanding of the sun's cycles. During these pivotal moments, the rising and setting sun aligns perfectly with specific stones, casting dramatic shadows and illuminating the circle in ways that would have been impossible to ignore. For the people who built Stonehenge, these alignments weren't just astronomical events, they were sacred moments, opportunities to honor the sun's power and ensure its return. The stones themselves may have served as a kind of celestial calendar, marking the passage of time and the turning of the seasons, while also connecting the earthly and the divine. Far to the east, the Babylonians took this connection even further, developing one of the earliest and most sophisticated systems of astrology. For them, the stars weren't just markers of time, they were messages from the gods, a way to understand the will of the heavens and predict the future. The Babylonians divided the sky into 12 sections, each associated with a constellation, the foundation of what would later become the zodiac. These celestial patterns were believed to influence everything from the fate of kings to the success of crops, and their priests spent countless hours observing the night sky, recording planetary movements and interpreting their meanings. This blend of astronomy and astrology wasn't just a science, it was a spiritual practice, a way to align human life with the rhythms of the cosmos. The Mayans, too, were master astronomers, building observatories like the one at Chichen Itza to track the movements of the stars. Their intricate calendar systems, based on precise observations of the sun, moon, and planets, allowed them to predict celestial events with remarkable accuracy. Eclipses, in particular, were seen as moments of great significance when the balance between the earthly and the divine was at its most delicate. The Mayans believed that these events required careful rituals to ensure the world remained in harmony, and their priests would perform ceremonies to appease the gods and restore order. For the Mayans, the heavens weren't just a source of knowledge, they were a mirror of the sacred, reflecting the interconnectedness of all things. In ancient Egypt, the stars played a similarly vital role, shaping both religious beliefs and daily life. The Egyptians used star clocks known as decans to track the passage of time at night, dividing the sky into 36 constellations that rose and set in a predictable cycle. These celestial markers weren't just practical tools, they were deeply symbolic, representing the journey of the sun god Ra through the underworld each night. The Egyptians believed that the stars were the souls of the blessed dead, shining forever in the heavens as a reward for their virtuous lives. This connection between the stars and the afterlife was reflected in the design of their tombs and temples, which were often aligned with specific constellations to ensure the deceased's safe passage to the next world. But the influence of the heavens wasn't limited to rituals and architecture. It also shaped the timing of religious festivals and ceremonies. In Greece, the Olympic Games were held every 4 years to coincide with the first full moon after the summer solstice, a celestial event that marked the beginning of a new cycle. In India, the festival of Diwali is celebrated on the darkest night of the lunar month, symbolizing the triumph of light over darkness. These connections between celestial events and religious practices reveal a universal truth. For ancient cultures, the heavens weren't just a backdrop to life, they were an active force, shaping the rhythms of existence and offering a glimpse into the divine. As we reflect on the role of astronomy and astrology in ancient spirituality, it's worth asking, how did these celestial beliefs shape the way people experience the world? The stars weren't just distant objects, they were part of a living, breathing cosmos, a source of wonder and wisdom that guided every aspect of life. And just as the heavens influenced the timing of festivals and the design of temples, they also inspired another profound practice, pilgrimage. From the sacred journeys to Delphi in Greece to the long treks to Mecca in the Islamic world, pilgrimage was a way to connect with the divine, to step outside the ordinary and into the extraordinary. In the next part of our journey, we'll explore how these sacred travels shaped ancient spirituality, drawing people closer to the gods and to one another. Pilgrimage, a word that conjures images of long, arduous journeys, dusty roads, and the promise of spiritual renewal. For ancient cultures, these sacred travels were far more than mere trips. They were acts of devotion, courage, and transformation. Whether it was the Greek trek to Delphi, the Hindu pilgrimage to the Ganges, or the countless other journeys to sacred sites across the globe, pilgrimage was a way to bridge the gap between the human and the divine. But what drove people to leave behind the comfort of their homes and embark on such demanding quests, and what did they hope to find at the end of their journeys? The answers lie in the profound connection between physical effort and spiritual reward, a connection that continues to resonate in our modern world. Take, for instance, the journey to Delphi, one of the most revered pilgrimage sites in ancient Greece. Nestled on the slopes of Mount Parnassus, Delphi was believed to be the center of the world, marked by the sacred Omphalos stone. Pilgrims traveled from far and wide to consult the oracle of Apollo, whose cryptic prophecies could shape the fate of nations. The journey itself was no small feat. Winding mountain paths, unpredictable weather, and the sheer distance tested the resolve of even the most determined travelers. Yet, it was precisely this hardship that made the pilgrimage meaningful. The physical challenges were seen as a form of purification, a way to prepare the body and soul for the divine encounter that awaited. For those who reached Delphi, the experience was transformative, offering not just answers but a deeper understanding of their place in the cosmos. Halfway across the world, the Hindu pilgrimage to the Ganges River carried its own set of challenges and rewards. Known as the Ganga, this sacred river is believed to have descended from the heavens, its waters capable of washing away sins and granting liberation from the cycle of rebirth. Pilgrims, or yatras, would travel for weeks, sometimes months, to reach the river's banks, often enduring extreme heat, illness, and fatigue along the way. Yet, the act of bathing in the Ganges was more than just a ritual. It was a moment of profound spiritual renewal. The journey itself became a metaphor for life's struggles, each step a reminder of the perseverance needed to overcome obstacles and reach a higher state of being. For many, the pilgrimage was not just about personal salvation, but about communal connection, as travelers from all walks of life came together in shared devotion. But pilgrimage wasn't just about the destination, it was about the journey, the physical exertion, the moments of doubt, the encounters with fellow travelers. All of these elements contributed to the transformative power of the experience. In a world where life was often harsh and uncertain, pilgrimage offered a way to take control of one's destiny, to seek answers and healing in a tangible way. It was a reminder that the sacred was not confined to temples or shrines, but could be found in the act of striving, of moving forward despite the odds. Yet, the challenges of pilgrimage were not just physical, they were also deeply emotional. For many, the journey was a time of introspection, a chance to confront fears, regrets, and hopes. The act of leaving behind the familiar and stepping into the unknown forced pilgrims to confront their own limitations and strengths, often leading to profound personal growth. In this sense, pilgrimage was as much about inner transformation as it was about reaching a sacred site. It was a way to shed old identities and emerge renewed, carrying the blessings of the gods and the wisdom of the journey. The communal aspect of pilgrimage also played a vital role. These journeys were rarely solitary, they were shared experiences, bringing together people from different backgrounds and walks of life. The bonds formed along the way, through shared hardships, stories, and rituals, created a sense of unity that transcended social divisions. Pilgrimage was a reminder that spirituality was not an individual pursuit, but a collective one, a way to connect not just with the divine, but with one another. As we reflect on the role of pilgrimage in ancient cultures, it's worth asking, what can these journeys teach us about our own lives? In a world that often feels fragmented and disconnected, the idea of pilgrimage offers a powerful metaphor for the human experience, a reminder that the path to meaning and connection is rarely easy, but always worth the effort. And as we turn our attention to the role of healing and medicine in ancient rituals, we'll see how these practices offered another way to bridge the gap between the physical and the spiritual, providing both comfort and transformation to those in need. Healing in the ancient world was never just about the body, it was a delicate dance between the physical and the spiritual, where herbs, prayers, and rituals worked in harmony to restore balance. For many cultures, illness wasn't seen as a random affliction, but as a sign of spiritual disconnection, a disruption in the flow of energy between the individual and the divine. This belief shaped their approach to medicine, blending practical remedies with sacred ceremonies in ways that might seem strange to modern eyes, but were deeply effective for their time. From the healing temples of Greece to the shamanic rituals of Siberia, ancient societies understood that true wellness required more than just treating symptoms. It demanded a return to harmony with the unseen forces that governed life. One of the most fascinating examples of this holistic approach comes from the temples of Asclepius, the Greek god of healing. These sanctuaries, scattered across the ancient world, were part hospital, part spiritual retreat. Pilgrims seeking relief from illness would travel great distances to these sacred sites, often bringing offerings and undergoing purification rituals before entering. Once inside, they would sleep in the abaton, a special chamber where it was believed Asclepius himself would visit them in their dreams. These nocturnal encounters weren't just symbolic, they were deeply transformative. The god might appear and perform a miraculous healing, or he might offer cryptic instructions for treatment, perhaps a specific herb, a change in diet, or a ritual bath. The priests, skilled in interpreting these visions, would then guide the patient through the prescribed remedies, blending spiritual guidance with practical care. This fusion of faith and medicine wasn't just about curing the body, it was about restoring the soul, a reminder that health was as much about connection as it was about chemistry. Herbal remedies played a central role in this intersection of spirit and body, with plants often imbued with both medicinal and magical properties. Take mandrake, for instance, a plant shrouded in mystery and myth. Known for its potent roots, which resemble human figures, mandrake was believed to hold powerful healing properties, capable of curing ailments ranging from insomnia to infertility. But harvesting it was no simple task. Ancient texts describe elaborate rituals for uprooting the plant, including tying it to a dog and using the animal's strength to pull it from the ground. The plant's screams, it was said, could kill anyone who heard them, a belief that underscored the sacred and dangerous nature of its power. Mandrake wasn't just a remedy, it was a bridge between the mundane and the magical, a reminder that even the simplest plant could hold profound spiritual significance. In Siberia, shamans took this connection even further, blending physical healing with spiritual warfare. For the indigenous peoples of this harsh landscape, illness was often seen as the work of malevolent spirits, and the shaman's role was to confront these forces directly. Through drumming, chanting, and trance-like states, the shaman would journey to the spirit world, negotiating with or battling the entities causing the sickness. These rituals weren't just symbolic performances, they were acts of profound faith and courage, requiring the shaman to risk their own well-being for the sake of their community. The tools of their trade, drums, masks, and sacred herbs, were more than just props. They were conduits for spiritual energy, amplifying the shaman's power and focus. For those who witnessed these ceremonies, the healing wasn't just physical. It was a reaffirmation of their connection to the unseen forces that shaped their lives. But how did these ancient practices shape our understanding of health and spirituality? At their core, they reveal a truth that modern medicine is only beginning to rediscover. The mind, body, and spirit are deeply intertwined, and true healing requires addressing all three. For the ancients, this wasn't just a theory, it was a lived reality, reflected in every remedy, every ritual, every prayer. Their approach reminds us that health is more than the absence of disease. It's a state of balance, a harmony between the individual and the world around them. As we reflect on these ancient healing practices, it's impossible not to wonder how they might inform our modern approaches to medicine. While we've made incredible advances in science and technology, there's still much to learn from the wisdom of the past. And as we shift our focus to the role of war and conflict in ancient ceremonies, we'll see how these same principles of balance and connection shaped even the most intense and violent aspects of human life. From battlefield rituals to ceremonies of victory and defeat, the ancient world offers a unique perspective on the intersection of violence and the sacred. War and conflict have always been defining features of human history, but for ancient societies, they were more than just battles. They were sacred acts, imbued with rituals that transformed violence into something greater. These ceremonies weren't just about strategy or strength, they were about connecting with the divine, seeking favor from the gods, and making sense of the chaos of war. From the fierce war gods of Greece and Rome to the symbolic flower wars of the Aztecs, ancient cultures used rituals to prepare for battle, celebrate victories, and mourn losses, weaving the sacred into every aspect of warfare. Take Mars, the Roman god of war, whose influence extended far beyond the battlefield. For the Romans, Mars wasn't just a deity of destruction, he was a symbol of order, protection, and renewal. Before any military campaign, Roman generals would offer sacrifices to Mars, seeking his blessing for victory and the safety of their soldiers. These rituals weren't just formalities, they were acts of devotion, designed to align the army's efforts with the will of the gods. Even the Roman triumph, the grand parade celebrating a victorious general, was as much a religious ceremony as it was a military one. The triumphant general would ride through the streets of Rome, dressed in the robes of Jupiter, while the spoils of war and captured enemies were displayed as offerings to the gods. This spectacle wasn't just about glorifying the general, it was about thanking the divine for their favor and reaffirming Rome's place as a chosen nation under the gods' protection. In ancient Greece, Ares, the god of war, played a similarly central role, though his temperament was far more volatile. Unlike Mars, who was revered for his disciplined approach to conflict, Ares embodied the chaotic, brutal side of war. Rituals dedicated to Ares often involved offerings of weapons or shields, symbolizing the soldier's dependence on his favor. The Greeks also held funeral games in honor of fallen warriors, blending grief with celebration. These games weren't just about honoring the dead, they were about reaffirming the values of courage and sacrifice, reminding the living of the cost of war and the glory it could bring. But not all ancient rituals of war were about conquest. The Aztec flower wars, for instance, were a unique blend of combat and ceremony. These conflicts, fought between neighboring city-states, weren't driven by a desire for territory or resources, but by the need for sacrificial captives to honor the gods. The battles were highly ritualized, with specific rules and objectives, and the captured warriors were often treated with respect before their eventual sacrifice. The Flower Wars reveal a different perspective on conflict, one where war wasn't just about domination, but about maintaining cosmic balance. By offering captives to the gods, the Aztecs believed they were ensuring the continued survival of their world, a stark contrast to the more pragmatic motives of other cultures. How did these rituals shape the perception of war and its consequences? For many ancient societies, they provided a way to frame conflict within a larger spiritual context, transforming it from a purely human endeavor into a divine mandate. The rituals surrounding war, whether it was the Roman triumph, the Greek funeral games, or the Aztec flower wars, helped societies make sense of the violence and loss that came with it. They offered a way to honor the dead, celebrate the living, and seek meaning in the chaos of battle. These ceremonies weren't just about victory or defeat, they were about connection to the gods, to the community, and to the values that defined a culture. Yet, war wasn't the only way ancient societies connected with one another. Alongside the clash of swords and the roar of battle, there was another force at work, one that built bridges instead of burning them. Trade and cultural exchange brought people together, spreading not just goods but ideas, beliefs, and rituals. As we explore this next chapter, we'll see how these networks of exchange shaped the spiritual landscape of the ancient world, carrying traditions across borders and blending them into something new. From the bustling markets of Mesopotamia to the Silk Road stretching across Asia, the flow of trade was a powerful force, weaving the sacred and the secular into a tapestry as rich and complex as the cultures it connected. The ancient world was not just a patchwork of isolated civilizations. It was a vibrant tapestry woven together by the threads of trade and cultural exchange. Across vast deserts, treacherous mountain passes, and open seas, merchants, travelers, and pilgrims carried not only goods but ideas, beliefs, and rituals. These exchanges transformed the spiritual landscapes of entire regions, blending traditions and creating new forms of worship. From the bustling markets of the Silk Road to the bustling ports of the Mediterranean, trade routes became highways of the sacred, connecting distant cultures in ways that enriched, and sometimes challenged, their belief systems. One of the most striking examples of this exchange is the spread of Buddhism along the Silk Road. Originating in India, Buddhism traveled north and east, carried by monks, merchants, and missionaries who traversed the vast network of trade routes. Along the way, it encountered and absorbed elements of local traditions, adapting to new cultures while retaining its core teachings. In China, for instance, Buddhism blended with Taoist and Confucian ideas, giving rise to unique schools of thought and practice. The famous Buddhist caves of Dunhuang, adorned with intricate murals and sculptures, stand as a testament to this fusion, showcasing how art and religion intertwined across cultures. This syncretism wasn't just about coexistence, it was about transformation, as each culture reshaped Buddhism to reflect its own values and worldview. The Mediterranean world, too, was a melting pot of religious ideas, where Greek, Egyptian, and Roman traditions intermingled in fascinating ways. The syncretism of Greek and Egyptian deities is a prime example of this blending. When Alexander the Great conquered Egypt, he brought with him Greek culture and religion, but he also embraced Egyptian traditions. The result was a unique fusion, as seen in the figure of Serapis, a god who combined elements of Osiris, the Egyptian god of the afterlife, with Zeus, the king of the Greek pantheon. Serapis became a symbol of unity, worshipped in both Egypt and Greece, and his cult spread throughout the Roman Empire. This blending of traditions wasn't just a political maneuver, it was a reflection of the interconnectedness of ancient societies, where gods and rituals transcended borders. But how did these exchanges enrich or challenge ancient belief systems? On one hand, they brought new perspectives and practices, enriching local traditions and fostering a sense of shared humanity. The spread of Mithraism, for example, from Persia to Rome, introduced new rituals and symbols that resonated with soldiers and merchants alike. The Mithraeum, a sacred space dedicated to the god Mithras, became a place of spiritual connection for diverse communities, united by their devotion to this foreign deity. On the other hand, the introduction of new beliefs could also create tension, as local traditions were challenged or even displaced. The spread of Christianity, for instance, often led to the decline of older religions, as communities embraced this new faith and its promise of salvation. These exchanges remind us that ancient spirituality was never static. It was dynamic, evolving in response to the movement of people and ideas. The trade routes that carried silk, spices, and precious metals also carried prayers, rituals, and divine visions, creating a spiritual network that spanned the globe. Yet, even as these traditions flourished, they also faced challenges: the rise of monotheistic religions, the decline of empires, and the shifting priorities of societies began to erode the foundations of many ancient ceremonies. Over time, the grand temples fell into disrepair, the sacred fires were extinguished, and the rituals that once bound communities together faded into memory. As we reflect on the decline of these ancient ceremonies, it's worth considering what was lost and what endured. The blending of traditions didn't just disappear, it left its mark on the world, shaping the religions and cultures that followed. The echoes of these ancient exchanges can still be heard today in the rituals, symbols, and stories that connect us to the past. And as we turn our attention to the final chapter of our journey, we'll explore how these lost legends continue to resonate, offering lessons and inspiration for our modern world. The grand rituals and ceremonies of antiquity, once the lifeblood of civilizations, began to fade as the world shifted beneath them. The decline of these ancient practices wasn't sudden or uniform, it was a slow unraveling, shaped by forces both external and internal. The rise of monotheistic religions, political upheaval, and sweeping cultural changes all played their part in transforming or erasing traditions that had endured for centuries. Yet, even as some rituals vanished, others found new life, absorbed into the fabric of emerging belief systems. What caused this profound shift, and what can we learn from the way these ancient practices adapted or disappeared in the face of change? One of the most transformative forces was the spread of Christianity across Europe. As this new faith gained momentum, it often clashed with the polytheistic traditions of the Roman Empire and the indigenous cultures it encountered. Temples to Jupiter and Venus were repurposed as churches, and festivals honoring the old gods were replaced with Christian holidays. Christmas, for instance, absorbed elements of the Roman Saturnalia, a midwinter celebration of light and renewal, while Easter incorporated symbols of fertility and rebirth tied to ancient spring rituals. This wasn't just a case of suppression, it was a strategic blending, a way to ease the transition for converts while redefining the sacred in a new context. Yet, not all traditions survived this transformation. The Eleusinian Mysteries, once the pinnacle of spiritual experience in ancient Greece, were lost entirely, their secrets buried with the last initiates. Across the Atlantic, the fall of the Aztec Empire marked another turning point. When Spanish conquistadors arrived in the early 16th century, they brought not only weapons, but also a fervent mission to convert the indigenous population to Christianity. The grand temples of Tenochtitlan were dismantled, and the stones used to build churches. The Aztec practice of human sacrifice, central to their spiritual worldview, was condemned as barbaric and stamped out. Yet, even here, traces of the old ways persisted. The Day of the Dead, a modern Mexican holiday that honors deceased loved ones, echoes the Aztec tradition of celebrating the dead as part of the natural cycle of life. What was once a ritual of remembrance and renewal has been reinterpreted, blending indigenous beliefs with Catholic practices to create something entirely new. Political upheaval also played a significant role in the decline of ancient ceremonies. The collapse of empires often meant the loss of the cultural and religious structures they supported. When the Roman Empire fell, the centralized authority that had maintained state-sponsored rituals dissolved, leaving many traditions to fade away. Similarly, the conquest of the Inca Empire by the Spanish disrupted the intricate religious practices that had sustained Andean communities for generations. Without the support of political and religious leaders, these rituals struggled to survive, their meanings and significance lost to time. Yet, the decline of ancient ceremonies wasn't always a story of loss. In some cases, it was a story of transformation, as old practices were reinterpreted and absorbed into new traditions. The Norse Yule festival, for example, celebrated the winter solstice with feasting and fire. When Christianity spread to Scandinavia, Yule was incorporated into Christmas celebrations, bringing with it the tradition of the Yule log and the spirit of communal joy. This blending of traditions reminds us that the sacred is not static, it evolves, adapting to the needs and values of each new generation. What lessons can we learn from the decline of these ancient practices? For one, they remind us of the resilience of human spirituality. Even in the face of persecution and upheaval, the sacred finds a way to endure, whether through adaptation, reinterpretation, or the quiet persistence of memory. They also challenge us to consider what we might lose when we dismiss or suppress the spiritual practices of others. The richness of our shared human heritage lies in its diversity, in the countless ways we have sought to understand and connect with the divine. As we turn our attention to the modern echoes of these ancient traditions, we'll see how they continue to shape our world, from the rituals we practice to the stories we tell. The past is never truly gone. It lingers in the symbols, the rhythms, and the questions that still resonate within us. And in exploring these connections, we may find new ways to honor the wisdom of those who came before us, even as we forge our own paths forward. As we journey from the ancient world to the present, it's striking how many of these long-lost rituals continue to echo in our modern lives. Take Halloween, for example, a holiday that fills our streets with costumes, jack-o'-lanterns, and a sense of playful mischief. Yet, beneath the candy and decorations lies a deeper connection to the past. Halloween traces its roots back to Samhain, the ancient Celtic festival that marked the end of the harvest season and the beginning of winter. For the Celts, Samhain was a time when the boundary between the living and the dead grew thin, allowing spirits to walk the earth. Bonfires were lit to ward off malevolent forces, and offerings were left to honor ancestors. Today, while the spiritual significance may have faded for many, the essence of Samhain lives on in our modern celebrations, a reminder of how ancient traditions can adapt and endure. Incense, too, carries the fragrance of antiquity into our contemporary world. From the smoky temples of ancient Egypt to the serene shrines of Buddhism, the use of incense has long been a way to purify spaces, honor the divine, and create a sense of sacred atmosphere. Today, incense remains a staple in many religious practices, from Catholic Mass to Hindu puja ceremonies, but it's also found a place outside of formal worship, used in yoga studios, meditation spaces, and even homes as a way to promote calm and focus. This enduring appeal speaks to the universal human desire to connect with something beyond the material world, using sensory tools to elevate the spirit. In recent decades, there's been a growing revival of interest in ancient spirituality, with movements like neo-paganism embracing the rituals and beliefs of pre-Christian cultures. Modern pagans celebrate the cycles of nature, drawing inspiration from traditions like the Wheel of the Year, which marks the solstices, equinoxes, and festivals like Samhain and Beltane. These practices aren't just about nostalgia, they're a way for people to reconnect with the rhythms of the earth and find meaning in a fast-paced, technology-driven world. The resurgence of ancient spirituality raises an intriguing question. Why do these practices, born in a world so different from our own, still resonate with us today? Perhaps it's because they tap into something timeless, the human need to find meaning, to feel connected to the cycles of life, and to honor the mysteries of existence. Ancient rituals offer a sense of continuity, a way to anchor ourselves in a world that often feels fragmented and uncertain. They remind us that, despite the passage of centuries, we still grapple with the same fundamental questions. Who are we? Where do we come from, and what lies beyond this life? Yet, as we seek to understand and revive these ancient practices, we face significant challenges. Many of these rituals were passed down orally, leaving little written record of their details or significance. Archaeological evidence can offer clues, but interpreting these fragments requires careful scholarship and a willingness to acknowledge the gaps in our knowledge. The task is further complicated by the biases and assumptions of those who first documented these traditions, often through the lens of colonial or religious agendas. How do we separate the authentic from the imagined, and how do we honor these practices without reducing them to mere trends or superficial imitations? These questions remind us that the study of ancient rituals is not just an academic exercise, it's a journey of discovery, one that requires humility, curiosity, and respect. As we uncover the echoes of the past in our present, we're invited to reflect on what these traditions mean to us and how they can enrich our lives. Whether through the flicker of a candle, the scent of incense, or the rhythm of a seasonal celebration, the ancient world continues to speak to us, offering wisdom and wonder for those willing to listen. Imagine trying to solve a puzzle where half the pieces are missing and the other half are scattered across thousands of years. This is the daunting task historians and archaeologists face when piecing together the rituals of ancient civilizations. From crumbling temples to faded cave paintings, the evidence we have is often fragmentary, leaving us with more questions than answers. Take, for instance, the Rosetta Stone, a slab of rock inscribed with the same text in 3 languages. Before its discovery, the hieroglyphs of ancient Egypt were an impenetrable mystery. The stone became the key to unlocking an entire civilization's written history, revealing the intricacies of their religious practices and daily life. Yet for every Rosetta Stone, there are countless artifacts that remain silent, their stories obscured by time. One of the greatest challenges in studying ancient rituals is the cultural gap that separates us from the people who practiced them. When we look at the vivid cave paintings of Lascaux, for example, we see images of animals and hunters, but what do they truly mean? Were they part of a ritual to ensure a successful hunt, or perhaps a way to honor the spirits of the animals? Without written records or first-hand accounts, we're left to interpret these images through the lens of our own modern perspectives, which can lead to misunderstandings or oversimplifications. This is where interdisciplinary approaches become invaluable. By combining archaeology, anthropology, linguistics, and even chemistry, researchers can piece together a more nuanced picture of the past. For instance, chemical analysis of residues in ancient vessels can reveal what substances were used in rituals, while linguistic studies of ancient texts can shed light on the beliefs and practices that shaped them. But even with these tools, biases can creep in. Historians and archaeologists often bring their own cultural assumptions to their work, which can skew interpretations. The early explorers of Mesoamerica, for example, viewed the Aztec temples through the lens of their own Christian beliefs, labeling them as pagan and barbaric. It wasn't until later scholars took a more open-minded approach that we began to understand the complexity and sophistication of Aztec religion. This raises an important question. How can we ensure our understanding of the past is both accurate and respectful? One answer lies in collaboration, working closely with modern descendants of ancient cultures who can offer invaluable insights into their ancestors' traditions. Despite these challenges, the allure of uncovering these lost rituals remains irresistible. Each discovery, no matter how small, brings us closer to understanding the people who came before us and the beliefs that shaped their lives. It's a reminder that history is not just a collection of facts, but a living, breathing narrative, one that continues to evolve as we uncover new pieces of the puzzle. And as we delve deeper into these mysteries, we're not just reconstructing the past, we're enriching our present, finding connections that bridge the gap between ancient and modern, and reminding ourselves of the enduring power of human creativity and faith. As we reflect on these challenges, it's worth considering how they shape our own relationship with history. What does it mean to truly understand the past, and how can we approach it with both curiosity and humility? These questions lead us to the next chapter of our journey, where we'll explore how ancient rituals continue to inspire and influence us today, from the revival of forgotten traditions to the ways they shape our modern world. What is it about the whispers of ancient rituals that continues to draw us in, even centuries after the fires of those ceremonies have burned out? Perhaps it's the way they speak to something timeless within us, a yearning to connect with the divine, to find meaning in the chaos of existence, or simply to understand who we are and where we come from. Ancient mysteries are more than just relics of the past. They are mirrors reflecting the deepest questions of the human experience. From the intricate symbolism of the Eleusinian Mysteries to the celestial alignments of Stonehenge, these practices remind us that our ancestors were not so different from us. They too sought answers to life's greatest questions, weaving their hopes, fears, and dreams into rituals that have endured long after their cultures faded. This enduring allure isn't just about nostalgia for a bygone era. It's about the universality of the human condition. Rituals like the Aztec flower wars or the Norse funeral games may seem distant and foreign, but at their core, they grapple with themes we still wrestle with today: life, death, sacrifice, and renewal. They remind us that, across time and space, people have sought ways to make sense of the world and their place in it. This shared quest for understanding is what makes ancient rituals so compelling. They aren't just stories or traditions, they are windows into the human soul, offering glimpses of how different cultures navigated the same existential challenges we face today. This fascination has left an indelible mark on our modern world, from the haunting melodies of classical music inspired by ancient myths to the vivid imagery of fantasy novels steeped in forgotten legends. The echoes of these rituals resonate in our art, literature, and spirituality. Take, for instance, the way the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice has inspired countless operas, poems, and films. The story of a musician descending into the underworld to reclaim his lost love speaks to our deepest fears and desires, our longing to defy death, our hope for redemption, and our struggle with the limits of human power. These ancient tales continue to captivate us because they touch on truths that are as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago. Even in our spiritual practices, the influence of ancient rituals is unmistakable. Yoga, for example, traces its roots back to the Vedic traditions of India, where it was not just a physical practice but a spiritual one, aimed at achieving unity with the divine. Today, millions around the world turn to yoga not just for its health benefits, but for its ability to provide a sense of peace and connection. Similarly, the revival of pagan traditions in modern neo-paganism reflects a desire to reconnect with the rhythms of nature and the cycles of the seasons. a longing that feels increasingly urgent in our fast-paced, technology-driven world. These practices remind us that the sacred is not confined to the past. It is a living, breathing force that continues to shape our lives. But why do we keep searching for answers in the rituals of the past? Perhaps it's because they offer us a sense of continuity, a way to anchor ourselves in a world that often feels fragmented and uncertain. In exploring these ancient mysteries, we're not just uncovering the beliefs of our ancestors, we're rediscovering parts of ourselves. The symbols, stories, and ceremonies that have survived the test of time remind us that, no matter how much the world changes, the fundamental questions of existence remain the same. What does it mean to live a meaningful life? How do we confront death and loss? And how do we find connection in a vast and often indifferent universe? As we've journeyed through the lost legends, forgotten ceremonies, and mythic beliefs of antiquity, we've seen how these traditions shaped civilizations, inspired art, and continue to influence our world today. From the sacred spaces of ancient temples to the symbolic tools of priests and shamans, each ritual offers a unique lens through which to view the human experience. They remind us that, while the specifics may vary, the search for meaning and connection is a universal thread that binds us all. And perhaps in understanding these ancient mysteries, we can find new ways to navigate our own lives, drawing strength and inspiration from the wisdom of those who came before us. So, as we close this exploration, let's carry forward the lessons of the past, not as relics to be studied from a distance, but as living traditions that continue to illuminate our path. The mysteries of antiquity are not just stories of the past. They are invitations to reflect, to connect, and to find meaning in the tapestry of our shared humanity. And in that reflection, we may just discover that the answers we seek have been with us all along, waiting to be uncovered in the echoes of ancient fires and the whispers of forgotten